Welcome to Soul Care, a time to reflect on what's happening in your life and also what has happened, to think about things afterwards. I always love the day after a holiday. In Easter time, I always anticipate the beauty of the season. I look forward to planning events in the church for Holy Week. And at home, I love to anticipate what's going to happen, plan the shopping list to buy the special foods and decorate the house, bring out the little bunnies and Easter baskets and put fresh flowers all around on the table and the counters and wherever I can find a pretty vase and a pretty spot. It's nice to anticipate this feeling of spring and new life that is such a promise that is to come. But at the end of the day on Easter this year, I have to say, I was exhausted. In the afternoon, I felt like lying down and sleeping. I was so tired. And by the end of the time, as we were talking after dinner, my eyelids were drooping. I was tired. And so the next morning, my daughter and her dog spent the night. So we got up late and we had breakfast together. And it was so nice because I just pulled out of the refrigerator the leftover fruit and pastries and things that we'd had on Easter morning. And voila, a feast again. And we enjoyed our time together. We made some extra coffee and lingered at the table and sat outside on the deck. It was so good to be the day after and to be relaxed and to feel renewed. We spent that day doing fun things, taking walks with the dog, playing music, reading, and I had long talks with my daughter. It's nice to be two women together and talk about the things women like to talk about, people and relationships. I got a few texts and emails on Monday, the day after Easter, some from family members with photos of Easter celebrations. That was fun. And also little words of gratitude from congregational members and people in the community. It warmed my heart to experience the day of Easter after the fact. Some things happen after the big day. One friend texted me that she had got to see her one grandson the day after Easter. After all, she had thought she wasn't going to get to see him at Easter at all this year, but she got to see him the day after. And they had an egg hunt together, and it was Easter all over again. The end of Easter differs in all of the gospel tellings in the Bible. In Mark, which is the earliest writing of the resurrection, the Easter story originally had very little ending. This is how it ended. The angel said to the women at the tomb, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has been raised. He's not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as I told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So they said nothing. They were afraid. That was the first ending. That was the first telling of what happened at Easter. The listeners who first would have heard that account would have had to decide, well, I wonder what the disciples did do next. And they also had to decide for themselves, what should we do next in our lives after we've heard this story of resurrection? The story ended so abruptly. Well, some years after that, an editor added a short ending to Mark, telling more what the women disciples may have done next. It goes like this. And all that had been commanded of them, they told briefly to those around Peter. And afterward, Jesus himself sent out through them from east to west the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. It sounds like a summary, doesn't it? It was added on to the narrative of the story itself because the story was so unfinished. There surely was more that had happened afterwards. So it was summarized by the writer that the message of saving grace went out through the followers well beyond them that day. There was something that happened after all, after the resurrection. Well, by the time the book of Matthew was written, the ending was even more formal. In fact, the author gives the very famous Great Commission at the end of the gospel after the disciples had returned to Galilee some time afterwards. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, it says, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." Beautiful words. So Jesus returned after death in Matthew and gave direction and blessing. In this account, quite a bit happened after the resurrection. Well, in Luke, the promise was different. Jesus appeared on the road to Emmaus Sunday night, the day of resurrection, and then in Jerusalem, where the disciples were staying, he appeared again. He reminded them that they had been witnesses of his life and teachings, and he went on to say, "And see, I am sending upon you what my Father promised. So stay here in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high." So he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he was blessing them, he withdrew from them and was carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they were continually in the temple, blessing God. You see, there was more for the followers to do. They were to stay in Jerusalem in the Gospel of Luke and receive the Holy Spirit, which we know later comes at Pentecost. God was not finished with them yet. And in the Gospel of John, the fourth Gospel, Mary Magdalene was at the tomb. Then Jesus appeared 3 times to the disciples and finally left them with the direction, "If you love me, feed my sheep. Follow me." The story of Easter is amazing, but what happens afterwards is what matters. Do we walk away in fear? Do we tell the others? Do we teach and baptize and spread the word of new hope? Do we feed the hungry and become the hands and feet of Jesus in the world? So, what happens for you now after Easter? We have come out of the darkness of Lent, and we have come out of the darkness of COVID somewhat, not completely. We are still afraid. of the pandemic. We're not ready to rejoice. But perhaps in spite of the darkness, in spite of the dangers of the pandemic, we can be beacons of hope. One tidbit of wisdom came across my screen in the form of an email this week. When you can't find the sunshine, be the sunshine. Perhaps that is what the post-Easter message is all about. And perhaps especially this year, this is what it should be all about. So I want to ask you a couple of questions today to reflect on. Just in your heart, think about the answers you would give. What are you grateful for this day? Where is light shining brightly in your life? And where is there a situation of darkness to which you can bring your light? How can you be the sunshine? Perhaps there's a neighbor or a cause that beckons to you. It is in giving that we receive. It is in dreaming the positive that life has meaning. And it is in smiling that we feel better and help others feel the sunshine too. May you smile and may it be well with your soul.